Just saying the name Bordeaux brings to mind pure luxury, alongside wines fit for kings and billionaires. But that is honestly just the tip of the iceberg, because those famous prestige wines represent only about 10% of the entire production. The rest comes from thousands of hardworking families making great everyday wines. You might have heard the old saying that nowhere else in the world will you drink wine this good, but also this bad. In reality, Bordeaux is almost like a whole continent, ranging from an honest €6 supérieur wine to a Premier Grand Cru that can cost 500 or even 5,000 euros. And here is a funny fact. Any producer can put Chateau on their label, even if they bottle the wine in a garage. The only actual condition is that the grapes must come from this massive region. Today's topic is just as fascinating as it is rich, and if you like wine even a little bit, you simply cannot skip these fundamentals. So let's put the map on the table and understand why the left bank feels like going to the gym with its structured Cabernet, while the right bank feels like a warm hug with its soft Merlot. We will also understand why you are absolutely not allowed to water these vines here. I am also going to tell you the story behind the famous 1855 classification, which, spoiler alert, was based purely on price and not on poetry. And we will see why Saint-Emilion seems to go through one classification scandal after the other. We are going to pull back the curtain on the wine trade, covering courtiers, négociants and the whole Place de Bordeaux system, where the wine is still in the cradle while people are already fighting over it. And of course, we will reach the real bread and butter moment: how to buy a great Bordeaux without burning through your entire safe accounts. To start understanding the universe of Bordeaux, it's really worth taking a look at the map. The Garonne and the Dordogne rivers meet to form the Gironde estuary, splitting the region into two banks. These two banks are like two characters in a novel, each with its own temperament, its own charm, and of course, its own favorite grapes. Let's start with the left bank. Way back during the Ice Age, glaciers brought limestone and gravel all the way down from the Pyrenees straight to Bordeaux. Because of this, the soil here is incredibly stony, warm and well drained. It completely traps the heat during the day, and at night when the cold, icy wind blows in from the Atlantic, those warm stones are an absolute blessing. And guess who loves this kind of climate? Cabernet Sauvignon. The result is wines with incredible structure, power and almost athletic elegance. On the map, this is where you'll find names that make any wine lover sigh with admiration. Now, on the other side of the river, the right bank, is a completely different type of soil. It is much more clay-based, damp and cold. Because of this, it is dominated by Merlot, which ripens much earlier and produces wine that are round, velvety and bursting with fruit. The big quality centers over here are Saint-Emilion and Pomerol. And here is an irresistible fun fact. Do you remember the 2004 movie Sideways and that famous line, "I am not drinking any fucking Merlot"? Well, after that movie came out, Americans completely started despising Merlot. Irony of ironies, the most expensive wines in the world, like Petrus de Le Pin, are actually 100% Merlot. But Bordeaux doesn't end here. Further south is Graves and Pessac-Léognan, a land of elegant reds and jaw-dropping dry white wines. And if anyone still doubts the quality of this area, this is where the legendary Chateau d'Yquem is born, the most famous sweet wine in the entire world. The title of Superior First Grow was given exclusively to this estate and no other wine in Bordeaux, red or white. It is basically the only student who got an 11 out of 10. And right between these two worlds, literally called Entre deux mers, or between two seas, you find honest expressive red and white wines at very friendly prices. By the way, have you ever tried a dry white wine from Bordeaux? I honestly don't know why nobody talks about them, because they are absolutely sensational. Why exactly does a winemaker mistreat the vine? Did you know that in Bordeaux, you are absolutely not allowed to water the vineyards? This strict prohibition actually applies to almost all of the classic wine regions across France. There are historical reasons for this, but it's mostly about quality. When the vine doesn't receive any artificial water, it is forced to dig its roots incredibly deep into the ground to find moisture. And that is exactly where it absorbs the true character of the terroir, meaning everything that makes a wine completely unique. And wines are definitely not stupid. They have a powerful survival instinct. When they realize that the environment is getting tough, the plant basically thinks, oh, I might not last much longer. And like anything in nature, its main goal instantly shifts to securing its descendants, which are the seeds inside the grapes. So instead of wasting precious energy on growing excess leaves and too many bunches, it concentrates everything into fewer grapes. But those few grapes become much more intense, concentrated and rich in flavor. The result? A little bit of stress for the vine, turns into way more aroma in the wine, more sugar and more soul in your glass. A happy wine gives you a lot of juice, but a suffering wine gives you a truly great wine. For the 1855 World's Fair in Paris, Emperor Napoleon III requested a definitive list of the absolute best wines in Bordeaux. To get this done, the Bordeaux negociants, whom we will talk about in just a minute, were called in. Even back then, they were the ultimate experts in the market. Since the whole wine landscape was pretty chaotic, they decided to classify the wines of the left bank based entirely on one thing: their market selling prices. The result was a system split into 5 levels, descending from the Premier Cru down to the 5e Cru, 1st to 5th growth, plus the legendary Chateau d'Yquem, which sat completely hors concours or in a league of its own. Incredibly, that list has barely changed to this day. There has only been one single major alteration in history back in 1973, when Chateau Mouton Rothschild was finally promoted from a 2nd growth to a 1st growth. Rumor has it that Jacques Chirac, who was the Minister of Agriculture at that time, gave them a little helping hand. He himself got promotion of his own later and became President of France. Now, you might ask yourself with good reason, over all this time, haven't many chateaux got better or worse? So why is this classification still carved in stone? Well, to find a different approach, you have to look across the river to the right bank, home to Saint-Emilion, Pomerol and their mythical Merlots. Back in 1855, this entire area was completely left out of the game. The right bank was seen as a rural countryside with very little prestige, no big negociants and zero commercial fame. The wines were good, but barely anyone knew them outside the region. It took another 100 years for Saint-Emilion to set up its own system, and it wasn't until the 1960s and 70s that the world truly started paying attention to Pomerol, thanks to a little wine called Petrus. But Pomerol, being tiny, highly valued and super consistent in quality, never felt even the need for an official classification. Saint-Emilion, however, with all its massive star power, decided to create its own classification with one catchy twist: it would be revised every 10 years. Sounds pretty democratic, right? Well, that is exactly where the drama started. In 2006, several chateaux that got demoted actually took the matter to the court, throwing around serious accusations of judges favoring their own friends. In the end, the justice system cancelled the entire classification for that year. Imagine that total chaos. Nobody knew who was a Grand Cru classé and who wasn't anymore. Then came 2012, bringing yet another massive controversy. Some of the newly promoted estates were accused of using their political influence in Paris and Bordeaux. Since then, Saint-Emilion has earned a bit of a reputation as the region of scandals, standing in a total contrast to the absolute rigidity of the 1855 list. Today, legendary icons like Chateau Angelus and Chateau Ozon have completely pulled out of the system, claiming that the whole process has become way too political and not nearly transparent enough. So you tell me, what is actually more honest? A system that literally never changes, or a system that changes so much that even the judges can't keep up?